Okay, so on the show today, Tracy Brown. So I've been interested in intuitive eating and what's sometimes called the no diet approach for a while. She's, we could say, a trauma-informed, big for me, non-diet dietitian. So I was going through Instagram and normally it's, the same old nonsense, and her stuff jumped out at me. So I immediately said, Zeba, that's my PA, Zeba, get her on the podcast. So joining us from Colorado, Zeba, Tracy, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. And that's a huge compliment. I'll be honest, I get pretty zoned out and bored with Instagram stuff myself. So the fact that you notice that like, oh, it's not the same old stuff is really a big deal, because I'm like, nobody likes my stuff because I just do whatever I do, and it's all good. So I appreciate that.
No, it jumped out at me, and I'm interested in the topic personally. Like I've not ever had an eating disorder, but I've certainly had compulsive eatings. I noticed it's one of the things that's sort of behind some other areas of my development, or I noticed myself eating when I kind of not hungry and stuff. So I'm super interested in this topic. What's going on there? But Tracy, let's find out about you a bit. Like, how did you get interested in the body and trauma and food? Like, what was the road in here?
Well, as you're mentioning all these really heavy topics, like I clearly was wired to be like dive to the deep kind of person, but I did have my own eating disorder. And I was pretty clear that it was way deeper than just like, oh, I want to be thin and want everybody to love me and like me. And as humans, we want to belong. However, I got into that work because that's what helped me, is to like, I've got to do the exact opposite of the way I got here around food. So I'm just going to eat the food, eat from hunger and fullness. I can't rely on diet culture to actually help me be an expert, because listening to culture is what helped get me into this mess in the first place with my own eating disorder. So I ended up getting help from somebody who did this kind of work, and that was pretty rare 25 years ago. And so I thought that's what dietitians do. We help people have a good relationship with food, take it or leave it, go with the flow. And then I got my education. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like, a lot of this is glorified disordered eating anyway. So I got my degree and like, okay, I'm either going to have to like figure out a way to help people actually just be chill and normal with their food, or I'm going to have to find another career. And so that's what I ended up doing. I just jumped through the hoops, got my degree, got my license, and just started studying like physiologically, how do bodies really work, and emotionally, why do we eat how we eat? And I got lots of training from other people who learned how to do that. And that's just my story of just kind of creating this, or not create, I didn't reinvent the wheel, but I learned how to like help people have a good relationship with food, just like I did. And accept that we all have different needs, accept that there's genetic diversity. Not everybody is going to eat the same way and look the same way. You're not screwed up. You're not broken. You're not flawed. You're just meant to grow up and be who you're meant to be. The trauma part of it was a subset of some of my clients when I was helping them with their like, chronic dieting or binge eating or emotional eating or whatever eating disorder they have. Recognize, think, wow, people can really learn how to like eat from hunger and fullness with some help interoceptively. It's not that hard. They just need practice and reassurance and all that. And learn about non-diet principles and learn how to accept how your body's made and what you're supposed to look like naturally. But then some people just really get stuck and start looping. They do good, and then the wheels would fall off. And I recognized, I knew something was up. Like, okay, they're dissociating in session, and they're forgetting what we're talking about, and they're really smart, competent people in other ways. Something's up. And then I recognized, oh, they're really revved up. When I'm talking to them, they're not fully here. And so the eating disorder world didn't really educate about that. It's like all CBT, change people's thinking. And I was like, well, this is not helping me. So I think I heard about Peter Levine like in 2011, and I read Waking the Tiger. So about trauma and somatic experiencing, all that. And I just was like, that's it. People are embodied. So
we'll come back to trauma. I want to take this right back to basics, because some listeners will know the no diet movement or intuitive eating, some won't.
Right.
And a normal cultural sort of point of view is like, maybe you try and cut calories, or avoid sugar, or maybe they're the healthy versions out there, supposedly, the kind of more orthorexic versions.
That's
of
right.
Gluten, no dairy, no sugar, no fun. There's a lot of my friends and counterculture are pretty neurotic about food, I notice. And or just like the fact that this isn't a logical thing. Like I started lifting weights about 6-7 months ago, and I went to my trainer, who's mostly like a weight trainer guy, pretty basic dietitian. I said, okay, what should I be eating? You know, I want to, you know, kind of build muscle, lose fat, whatever, pretty standard like PT thing. And he's like, look, just eat chicken and broccoli and, you know, lean protein and veg. And like, I knew it wouldn't work, but I was like, okay, I'm going to try and do that. And I just didn't do it. And I was pretty determined, you know, I was like, right, I want to do this. And there's just no way I stuck to what he said. And he was just like, well, just do it. And I was like, yeah, like, that's not really helpful. So I'm not lacking cognitive information, right? Like,
that's right. That's right.
Calories in, calories out. I get it, basic. But it was like, there was I realized this whole emotional piece involved that's got nothing to do with even if I'm hungry or not. And most people aren't even in there sensational enough necessarily to notice that, right? Like there is a basic skill of just noticing, hey, am I full?
That's right. That's right. So I think we all know, if we're really, really honest, that like food doesn't have to be hard. It's just when we eat a big variety of food, a mix of protein, carbs, and fat, we're probably going to get satisfied. But when we have any kind of deprivation in our systems, whether this is from childhood, from just chronically dieting, honestly, even from telling yourself like, I don't deserve to eat what I like because fill in the blank. It's just going to set up this like kind of fear-based system with food. And it's going to be hard to eat a variety of food if you're feeling like that you can't have what you want and you're under eating either practically, like, so let's say you need a certain amount of calories and you under eat it, you're going to build up a deficit that biologically you can't white knuckle yourself out of. You're going to have to eat more food to heal that deficit. So a lot of people come to me thinking they are emotional eaters, and I'll look at their food and it's like, your deficit's so big that your body's just thinking it's going to die. So it's driving you to eat to fix that deficit. This is not a emotional binge. This is a deprivation driven eating episode. You're not going to be able to do it this way. So if your goal really is health and fitness, you need to actually nourish your body, and it can't be a quick fix kind of way.
As I understand it, the basic idea of the no diet movement is that rather than depriving, sort of cutting something out or limiting calories or whatever, it's that you tune into your body and just be kind of in touch with what you really want.
That's right.
Is that fair to say? That's the
That's
basic
fair
idea?
to say. Yeah. So I'll just do the basic principles. Is that most of the time you want to eat from hunger. Most of the time you're trying to eat when you're good and done. That can be like good and done, and I'll be hungry and through it for hours. Full, feel some pressure. You might last a little longer than that. And then you trust it, like, oh, you know, time will go by, I'll digest this and I'll get hungry again. And then the other part of it is that if you cut out anything, you're just going to make it more special.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that, you know, and I've actually challenged people to do this. You know what? People tell me like, oh, if I start eating chocolate or cookies, I'll never stop. I'm like, you want to try? Well, let's do the hunger fullness diet with cookies and see how long it lasts. And if people actually were to do that after, I don't know, 3 goes of it in a day, you're going to be like, oh, I really still mentally like these cookies. I don't want to eat this anymore. I'm like sick of it.
My mother worked in the Cadbury's cream egg factory in Birmingham when she was a student. Okay. And she was allowed to eat as many Cadbury's cream eggs as she would like. You know, and this is the 60s where there wasn't quite so much chocolate and sugar around. And, you know, she said this was a dream job for about 2 days.
That's right.
And then she said after that, she would eat maximum 1 a day. And because she just was in a chocolate factory and she could eat as many as she wanted, and it was totally allowed and it was encouraged. And she just like, I just don't want to eat a load of them anymore.
So the fancy scientific word that they've done lots of studies on people with is habituation. When something's available, the shine wears off, right? When it's special and secret and not allowed, you can't stop obsessing about it, basically. And you get it while you can because it's the last, you're not supposed to eat it. So it creates this Last Supper syndrome. I got to get it while I can, and I'll be good again tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem in marriage, but that's another podcast, Tracy. So
I got you. However,
Same principle.
so biologically though, eat from hunger and fullness, eat a variety of food. And most people think that intuitive eating means you don't care about your health, you don't care about nutrition. That's not the point. That's always people's like, you're always going to get like objectors to it, but it's because they're afraid of trusting themselves, not because it actually doesn't work. It's because set aside some of the nutrition rules you got for a second and learn how to trust your body again. You will want to eat a variety of food, but you try to put the cart before the horse, or the horse before the cart.
Is there a case though that we're sort of a little bit wired to eat more than is healthy? Like we have some evolutionary background, like most of our ancestors were sort of starving half the time, right? Like, I've lived in countries with food scarcity, and it wasn't that long ago in Europe there was food scarcity, World War II and before, really. So is there a case that like, the problem is that we're in this environment, like I go into a shop and most of what's in there is high fat, high sugar, like I was in a shop last night and I just went, it's big shiny packets, with marketing adverts, and it's right there in front of me. Like, this is not a natural evolutionary environment, right? Like there's only so many bananas I can eat, but there's like sort of, I don't know, Belgian chocolate's a whole nother matter.
Yeah, well, Mark, true all of that. And all I know is from the experiences I've had with myself and thousands of sessions is that when people heal that food insecurity, I have lots of people who come to me who've like legitimately had food insecurity, like not enough food growing up, and then they got into diet culture, and so they had a double whammy of like issues to work through. But when food gets in full access, it starts to become less special. Now, that might take you a year or two to like heal all that, but people can. It's just that, we don't like to do emotional discomfort very much, and that's where some of the embodiment work can be helpful, and the nervous system health regulation work. But the reality is their drive to eat all the food will diminish when the food's available. It just takes time. It's like, it would be like feeding a person who was an orphan or had just like, when a lot of times when I have clients who've gotten adoptee children from countries that they legitimately they were starved. They did not have enough food. The first couple of years of their lives, food's a big issue. They want to eat all the candy, all the quick energy food, because their little bodies were deprived. They're making up for all that deprivation. But there becomes an equilibrium moment at some point. It's just not in our very like health as God Western cultures. That makes us really uncomfortable to like live out that process.
So are there like skills you teach people, like just noticing if they're hungry,
Totally.
like work on that?
Yeah, they're really, really in the weeds, basic stuff. Like you wake up in the morning, check in with yourself. How are you doing? Hungry, full, sad, buzzy, revved up, checked out. How are you doing? Over and over and over again, and creating a landing pad for that too. Like really helping people with the sensory work slow down to like, if you're having a hard time slowing down, let's work on that. Because sometimes slowing down is the scarier part, not the hunger fullness work. It's like, I slow down and I feel these feelings. I'm out. I'm either going to eat or not going to eat because I can't handle that. Though that's one of the biggest barriers to intuitive eating. It's not like the cognitive. We get it. It's not that, in theory, it's not that hard. It's just very scary to let go or to offer ourselves something else in these perceived safeties, which is dieting, restricting, food rules, or even not binging. It goes both ways. Some people like, hunger scares me. Lack of being stuffed scares me. So we have to look at the relationship of what is the function of all that.
So what I notice is that I eat more when I'm a bit tired or lonely, for example.
Sure.
Like when I'm away from home, work on a job, like the first job I did in Ukraine this year when it was really intense stress.
Yeah.
I was like
big time.
eating just junk food. And I even noticed I'm away from my wife for a week or two, and I start eating, just my food habits start slipping towards the less healthy habits. And sometimes I'm pretty cognizant of it. Like just last night, had kind of a tough day, difficult day, long day, had decent healthy dinner, was like, okay, yeah, cool, felt pretty satisfied. Then I had like another disappointment in the evening I wasn't expecting. And I found myself just in a shop buying ice cream, not physically hungry at all. And like what do I do in that situation? Like, I'm like, okay, I know I'm eating out of some emotional drive. I know this isn't particularly great. I'm not going to feel great when I'm stuffed. And we're not talking like hardcore binge here. It's just like, I'm full already. So why am I doing this kind of thing, you know? Like, I went chill with my wife. I actually bought her an ice cream, which was also nice. And it wasn't the worst thing in the world, right? But it's like, it just didn't feel, it was a bit compulsive. And I didn't feel great afterwards. I don't have some big body image issue, I don't think, but it was like low level kind of compulsive eating stuff. And I think that's pretty common if people were more.
I was going to say that circumstance is really common. And if I was looking at what I would want to do with you, Mark, is look at your whole day of food. And I would look at, okay, so does when people have a drive to eat at night, I have to look at, did you eat enough all day? If the first half of your day is low, how come that happened? And that either has to do with our busyness level. If we're dysregulated nervous system wise, if you're in fight or flight, those like digestion on board, accurate neuroception stuff is offline. It's like survival mode. And so we might undereat on accident. Like, I didn't feel hungry. I went 6 hours. I didn't notice it. So the evening is going to be, you finally come down for some of that fight or flight, and you might have some cellular hunger. Like, look, I only got 50% of my needs met today. So I ate and I got full, but I'm still at a deficit. So there's still a drive for fuel that can be happening. Or let's say that didn't happen to you. It's like, no, I was full on all day. I ate breakfast and lunch. I thought I got satisfied, or at least, there's a difference between being full and satisfied. Like, you can eat food, but like, I ate food, but now what? I'm not satisfied. So you can be eating to fix the missing satisfaction at night. Or let's say that everything was good to go all day long. You're not in fight or flight all day. You're not dissociated with your eating. And it's like, yeah, this is what I've got overcoupled in my history, that these certain kinds of foods, the moment it hits my mouth or my throat or whatever physical experience you're getting from those certain foods, they're coupled with an emotion. That's it, right? So for some people, I'd say ice cream, it's not the sugar, it is the sensation. Those first 2 bites give me sense that,
it's probably like first association, mum buying you on holiday kind of thing, that treat once a week. I mean, you're being a good boy from going to the supermarket.
Sure.
I distinctly remember that when I went to the supermarket with my mum, because she was a working mum, and sort of dragged me and my sister. It's like, if you're good, I'll buy you a candy bar, and we'd have that one chocolate bar a week kind of thing. And it was like, good boy, good girl.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So when you ate whatever you ate last night, it's something, well, I guess I would ask you, like, what is missing in this day that this food's providing? What connection, what relational feeling, what emotion? It's not good or bad. It's just like, oh, that's the function of that eating. If everything else is on board, meaning like there's no caloric deprivation, I'd be looking at.
Yeah, well, part of it is I lifted a lot of weights in the morning. And I find when I'm lifting, when you're lifting weights, like I lift weights, you're really breaking down your body. And the idea of not eating a lot when I don't know, there are these weightlifting guys who, I don't know how they do it for, bodybuilding competitions. Like, the idea of lifting,
starved.
Like, how do they, like, I don't even know how they would do it, like the willpower or pathology, I don't know, because it's like, when I've lifted weights, I'm going to fucking eat. That's just how it is. Like, I can't.
They're hungry too. They're not fun to be around. Let's just.
They're just grumpy and hungry, like when they're cutting. Yeah. Like, not a lot of fun, particularly like some low body fat guys with high muscle. A lot of people talk about unrealistic women's body issues, right? Like, I listened to a thing. Was it Hugh Jackman who plays Wolverine? And he's like, look, I had to suffer for 3 months, and then before the shoot, I dehydrated myself. And then there's a bit of clever lighting to make it look even better. And I was still grumpy, and I passed out at the end of the fight sequence because I was so calorie deprived. And I'm thinking, God, you're a professional. Literally, your only job is looking good and talking on camera. And you've got the best trainers in the world, the best, all these nutritionists, Hollywood, whatever. And you struggle, and you only look like that for that scene. And then 2 days later, you've eaten plenty of cakes. Like, guys have this crazy body.
So Mark, I'm so glad that you said that, because it's like, it doesn't matter how much professional support you have, you cannot outrun that physiologic response to starvation. You are going to not manage your cognitive ability, your emotions, and your physiology. It doesn't matter, rich, famous, all the people to support that. Physiology is physiology.
There's some famous boxers who always get really big after a fight, and different fighters, because it's just like they can't help themselves. It seems like
their body's healing that. If you're famous, it still doesn't mean you don't have the same, like pituitary gland and hypothalamus that makes you go back to try to heal that damage. That's just how it is. So.
Yeah, I try to remember not to compare myself to the 25-year-old young guys on Instagram either, so there's also some biology involved when you're 42. Like,
that's right.
I'm sure I could be ripped, but it's a lot harder just chemically than some of the young guys.
Well, yeah, that's right. So I hope that helps you a little bit with your day to like, oh, there's some factors here as to why I ate what I ate. Could be some deprivation, missing the mark with eating enough food with all the training I'm doing, and then just happy, mad, sad, afraid. How was I doing? And how did that food help me get me back in my window of tolerance, or like feeling more here or more settled or whatever?
I had a big realization about this 2 winters ago. I went to winter in Mexico. And because of the time difference, I couldn't overwork because of my team went online. And it was sunny, and I was swimming in the sea, and I was living in a chill place. And I actually was eating street tacos and burritos every day because they were super cheap and I liked them a lot, and they were just there. And I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'm lazy, I'm in Mexico, why not? And I lost weight. And I was like, I'm on a burrito diet. And I lost weight because I was happy and chill and in nature every day. And I'm like, hang on a minute, I've been eating what most people would say is just shockingly bad, greasy, meaty food, and I was losing weight. And that's when I went, well, it seems like the important factors here are more psychological than to do with the nature. Do I have gluten or dairy or whatever?
Yeah, there's no magical weight gain food. There's no magical weight loss food. There's food, protein, carbs, and fat. It all boils down to those components and your connection with what you're feeding.
Say more about the connection. Like, I noticed there's a difference in, like, my wife cooks me a meal versus Deliveroo. There's a different level of satisfaction in, like, okay, someone that cares about me has prepared this.
That's for you then. It's like, wow, you're eating this, and I don't know what that experience is like, but if you're more settled, if you feel safe, if you feel cared for, and that will put you again back in that, from a nervous system perspective. If you feel warm and safe in that kind of relationship, you're in the ventral vagal part of your nervous system. Ventral vagal is safe, connected, here, all the good stuff, like rest and digest. You're more likely like, oh yeah, I'm full, that was really good. Get more pleasure from what you're eating, have more connection with it, know when enough is enough.
Yeah, just very simply not rushing is a big one, right? Like,
and not rushing. That's right. Just being able to be present versus, doing emails, all the clicks and the glimmers and all the things. It's just, you're just more present to it and more satisfied. That's the theory, right? At least.
Food has all these layers, and maybe let's talk about the trauma piece a bit more. Like, one thing I noticed, like, I've traveled the world, and the more traumatized the country, the more people insist on feeding me. Like food's a big deal in a lot of places. Like Israel is a classic one. Every time I'm there, my friends are feeding me. Poland would be another. Places that have had food scarcity and or trauma. Like, it's totally different orientation to food than, I don't know, if I'm in Norway or somewhere.
Interesting.
Right? Now everywhere has trauma, but there's places with less trauma.
Yeah,
it's also a different feel around it. Like, I was just in Slovenia, which is a relatively untraumatized country, certainly compared to the other Eastern Bloc countries. Very chill, ventral vagal kind of vibe to it. Very sort of eco-regulated, co-regulated kind of chill place. Great for a holiday, actually. And people enjoy food in this kind of non-pushy, non-neurotic kind of way. Eat outside with friends. It's not so loaded. It's not quite as, like, precious as the French or the Italians have this weird thing going on. The food sort of got this moral quality to it in Italy that it doesn't have elsewhere. Whereas in Slovenia, it's just kind of easeful around food, kind of take it or leave it. You want ketchup and pineapple on your pizza? Go for it. Like, because there's different ways it expresses, right, culturally, from the sort of having to feed people through to these kind of very precise neurotic things. Like there's a lot going on there.
Good observation. I would love to be eating all these places to notice these things. It's really cool. Thank you for sharing that with me. It's like, yeah, if you could look back multi-generationally, that means something about how we connect, what we can offer, what's real safety, what's faux safety. I don't know. It's interesting to think about it.
Say a little bit more about how you've seen people with trauma use food. I guess it's a numbing for some to not feel the difficult emotions. For others, it has a safety association. Like, what is that connection in traumatized clients and food?
Well, so it can go any way you can ever possibly imagine it, depending on the person's experiences. So if you're in sympathetic, you're just as likely to binge, let's say, as if you're in dorsal. So dorsal is like that, the part of our nervous system that, okay, I couldn't fight or flight. There was no safety available. So I just had to hibernate and check out. Sometimes people eat to feel themselves because it's a pretty lost kind of hard way to exist if you're just holding up all the time. And sometimes there's a limit to which you can tolerate that. And so you might eat to like actually feel you have a body, to feel you exist, to feel something.
I think I'm like that with chili. I like that with very hot food. It's like, oh, I'm alive, something like
that. Right there. And so if you're really, and that might be bringing you up out of a little bit of, dissociations are really wide range. It's anywhere from feeling kind of blah and a little like, how did I drive home? I don't remember getting here, to like full on, I lost time and derealized. So people can eat for all kinds of ways to help them just feel something different, change your state. People can eat or not. All these places eat or not eat. I'll give you an example. So if you're chronically unsympathetic and there's no safe home base to land in, you might be eating again to like bring yourself down, just up out of that high activation because you don't want to have a panic attack, or you weren't allowed to feel your anger. You're eating to like push that back down because that wasn't allowed. It's not safe. Or you could be eating again to feel something, or the opposite, not eating because it's like, I can't feel this, anxiety, being afraid is not allowed. So if I don't eat, the less I eat, the less I feel, the smaller the container gets. Basically, your body's the container of all these experiences. So a person who restricts or chronically diets or obsessive compulsive with food, or ARFID, which is like, people call it picky eating, but really it's fear of food.
Sorry, what eating?
ARFID is called, it's basically like fear of food, fear of textures, fear of the experience of eating certain things. If you don't eat, you eventually just kind of get numbed out. You just get a little flatlined emotionally. So that can be a function of that. The same thing with if you're a little checked out in dorsal, people will go 6-8 hours no food. I'm like, Tracy, I wasn't trying to restrict. I just don't know what happened. My day just got away from me. It's not, they weren't trying. These are like clients, let's say, that struggle with dissociation. It's almost like the eating disorder part isn't really the main problem anymore. It's more just being here on the planet's the problem and staying safe. So they might restrict not on purpose, but just like, I here's my cabinet and I stared at it for 2 hours. Like, I didn't know how to reach. I couldn't do anything. I don't know. And it looks like some people like, wow, they have restrictive eating disorder. I'm like, well, maybe technically, but it's not about the body. It's not even about the calories anymore. It's, I'm not safe enough to reach for my needs. I can't identify my needs, that kind of stuff. So it manifests all kinds of ways, but all of it means to me, like, I don't have practice and resourcing to get into my window of tolerance and to feel safe, or I don't have one to start off with and we got to build one. So
there's a sort of solution here, really, just like do the trauma therapy, learn to regulate.
Yes, that's all it is, over and over and over again. Like,
it's
literally,
great.
All I'm doing is helping people like be present. What's relatively good enough right now in this moment? Can you hang on to that? And we're going to water that like a water in a garden. every day we're going to do that and build more resources and build more safety and build more safety, and then learn eventually your triggers or your glimmers, and just keep on nurturing that until it's like, oh, I'm a person with a internal sense of self and I can identify.
I think most people know what a trigger is. Do you want to say what a glimmer is? I've heard that a few times, but do you want to say that one just so people know?
Trigger is just like what gets you activated, overwhelmed. I want to get out of here. I want to fight. I want to check out. Whatever it is, it can be a sight, a sound, a memory, an experience. A person can say something that reminds you of something from 20 years ago you haven't processed and you didn't know it. It could be anything. It could be anything. A glimmer is like, wow, what helps me have a relative sense of okayness? It doesn't have to be perfect safety. It could just be neutral or just better or relatively good enough to like, whoa, that's not happening to me right now.
So healing our trauma, being able to stay as regulated as possible, noticing in our body these signals of actual fullness or sort of other emotional states that might be driving eating. And I guess, it's probably kind of a piece here around kind of self-forgiveness or acceptance. If it's like, hey, like I'm doing something that's not great or it's not perfectly healthy for me, it's being driven by trauma, but okay, I'm coping, and probably better that I'm eating a packet of crisps than, beating someone up or taking some heroin or something.
Perfect. Yeah.
Probably worse things I could be doing right now.
That's right.
And having some compassion, self-compassion, I guess, just pouring.
And I want to bring that. That's a really important point, because a lot of times people have a lot of trouble with intuitive eating, because if I took the drywall off your wall and I looked at your wiring, it's like, whoa, you don't have wiring for self-compassion. Well, self-compassion gets built in thousands of co-regulatory experiences. Like, you were with me and I was welcome here with you. That teaches some self-efficacy of like, oh, like they help me meet my needs. My needs must be okay. I can meet my needs. And I'll look at people's history and it's like, there's no wiring for this. Of course, this is hard.
Mm-hmm.
When you were sad, people were like, whatever, suck it up. Or that's not, you shouldn't be so scared about that. And it's like, oh, there was just, the wiring's not there. And I know there's a lot of brilliant researchers that talk about that, but it's like, oh, sometimes I'm not talking as much about hunger and fullness, perfection. It's like, hey, can we make sense of what's happening to you right now? Does that make sense to you? Oh, that makes sense that I ate this way at night. I look at my food physiologically. I don't get to say how many calories I need a day. I need what I need and that's it. Can we accept that?
One of my PTs was asking me to get an app and measure every single calorie that I took on. And I know from a fact that what you measure, you kind of get some handle on in some ways, but I was really resistant to the idea. I downloaded the app and actually I've never used it once because just something in me was like, I don't want to measure everything I eat. Like, I don't want that because it felt sort of inhuman somehow. You know what I mean? It
is. So let's make up some silly numbers. So nobody's triggered. Let's say that your body needs 5 calories a day. That's just a fact. And then somebody else comes along and says, for you to be a better version of yourself, you need 3 to get to that better version of you, because this version is just flawed. And you're like, how can that not create some kind of existential, like either a threat response? Of like,
what if it's like, so people go, yeah, that's all nice. I mean, one, the no restrictions at all thing I know is pretty threatening. Like many of us are on some kind of restriction. So I would let's take out medical things. Let's say you've got a nut allergy or whatever, right? You're gonna die if you take it. But then there's this whole middle ground of stuff that I just go, well, I feel a bit bloated if I have bread, right? So I generally cut out bread. But is it like I don't make that a rule, but like I'm just in touch with the fact that when I eat it, I just don't feel so good, so I stop wanting to eat it. Like I'm just like,
you have agency now, because it's not a rule. It's like, if I eat bread 3 times a day, pretty bloated, that's uncomfortable. So let's see 1 time a day, how's that work for me? So it's not a rule that I never eat it again. It's like, what is the capacity of my body with this food at this moment in time? It might be different in 5 years. It could be worse. It could be better. Not worried about that. It's not an all or nothing thing. How much can my body do?
And you still do
Still, yeah.
experiments like, hey, what would happen if I cut out
Yep.
dairy for a month? Like that's still a kind of imposed rule, right? Like, for example, my sister has very dry skin, but when she avoids dairy, it's just a lot better. But she would never know that intuitively. It took her like a month
Right.
or two to figure out.
Yeah. So intuitive eating isn't like this lack of common sense of like, let's experiment and try some stuff and see if you can improve your situation. But you really have to look at where you're at emotionally. For some people at the beginning of their journey, even if it's good for them, they can't do it yet. This is more for people who have more nervous system health capacity to be like, my skin is just like alligator. I think it's food related. I'm not positive. I don't want to get religious about it, but let's do a 3-week experiment and see what happens. And then add it back in like you would any short-term thing to figure out where's the edge. Now you know.
What I noticed is I'm happier when I eat vegans. Like if I kill and eat vegans, like it just like I don't know why. So it's just one of those things I have to hunt and kill vegans occasionally just for my own. But no, I'm with you. Make it so not too straight. And I know a lot of people can listen to this and go, yeah, that's all right, but I want to lose weight.
Yeah.
Because
So
we
does
are
everybody
in a
else in
beach
Western
culture. Many of us are carrying around. I have that, a little bit of a belly. I'm kind of in the gym going, I got stronger recently. And, I since learned like gaining muscle and losing fat at the same time is very difficult. There are people who can do it under certain circumstances or on certain drugs, but it's like I gained the muscle, but I gained a bit of belly with it because my appetite just went up, but I didn't want to fight it too much. So it's like I'm stronger, that feels good, but I'm a bit chubbier and that doesn't feel so good. And I just don't like kind of how it feels in my body. And I don't think I'm super vain about it. I'm not like, not taking my top off on the beach or anything. But I'm like, yeah, I could probably do with having less of that belly. Like, then that part of me goes, yeah, if I do this intuitive thing, it's not going to work. Yeah, I'm going to end up fat with let's go.
It's cross purposes, right? It's like you gotta, what I always ask people, what's your why? Of course, like how come you lose weight? Who says what's going to happen? You really got to look at the fantasy of, oh, if I get to a size whatever, then I'll be happy and I'll have no problems and everybody will love me. And I'm like, maybe. Then what? You got to keep that up to earn that love, right? Versus like be embodied, be agency, have an internal locus to control about who you are. And then if you are doing intuitive eating and your body changes, so be it. There's it's tough. I mean, this is a lot of hundreds of years of conditioning now we have around like thinner is better, fatter is terrible, and you can't be happy unless you get the former and avoid the latter. And you just have to look at your life. Is that really true?
Yeah, for sure. Like if I think of the happiest period of my life, it probably wasn't when I was the skinniest. And yeah.
It's a hard thing. This is the hardest part because people really don't argue with me ever about intuitive eating in terms of like the freedom and like they actually eat better long-term over time by not having restrictions because they, you get more in touch with like, we're very fortunate in Western cultures to have a variety of food and access to that. So we don't really get bored with your eating and you don't really overeat when you're doing this process. It's the argument's always about like, but it's not like how I think I need to be in this world to be okay. It's about belonging. It's never about health at the end of the day. Health can be fixed. We can work with that. That's not a big deal. That's easy.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to really try the no restriction thing because I think most people on sort of a diet most of the time. Not really. Yes. Then there's a group of people that are on hardcore diets, particularly
Mark, we call it careful eating. People are like, I'm watching it. I'm being really careful. Like, careful about what? There's not a landmine there with that brownie.
Right.
Like, what is this about?
Right. Like there's a certain kind, like I won't have too much of that, or I'll try not to have sugar for a few weeks, or hey, summer's coming up, so maybe I won't do that. Or you know what, I'll do that, I don't know, intermittent fasting thing. Like I've done that for a while, and then it becomes like a way to, like, I'm like, hey, it's breakfast, and I'm like, come on, eat. And I'm like, no, I've promised myself I'll have an 8-hour window to eat it. Like there's always these kind of like quite kind of new theories and good reasons that are like justifying it. Do you know what I mean?
That's totally right. That's right. Yeah.
What's the biggest pushback you get then? Is it like, hey, I just get fat if I do this, or?
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm gonna gain weight, and then people will judge me, and then I'll be alone and
die with cats.
I'll die forever alone. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty big, huh? That like everything would fall apart. And we're really talking about like developmental trauma experiences. We're not talking about the reality of like, even if you're in a bigger body and your signal doesn't mean that you're not wanted or lovable, and life is out there. We just think that we can't have it until we get a different body. That's what it's really a very deep thing. It's not, you look at the practicalities of things, like, oh, you don't leave the house because you think that's what happened to you, not because it would happen to you every single day, all the time, and that you don't have anything to offer.
You sent me some good notes ahead of time. One that jumped out at me was this phrase, I feel fat. I feel fat. What does that mean?
So I hear that all the time. It doesn't matter if somebody's 50 pounds, 500 pounds. It's because of this cultural conditioning. In our culture, you can just look at marketing and you'll see a thin person having all the things, having the boyfriend, girlfriend, having the car, the house, the cute kids, the nice stuff, whatever. And that's the marketing. And you'll see somebody else without a head being like, paraded out as if this is what all the unhealthy people look like. So we get these associations. Thin equals happy, attractive, healthy, smart. Fat equals unhappy, unhealthy, unfit, blah, blah, blah. All those things, even though in real life, you see fat people doing super fit things, thin people, can't do a sit-up. That's the reality. There's a mix of human experiences. So anyway, but we have these associations and we learn to start expressing, instead of saying, I feel upset, I feel lonely, I feel overwhelmed, we start to say, I feel fat. Because we'll have these emotions in our bodies. And if we have experiences of not knowing how to express how we feel about circumstances, it's like we'll displace all of our I feel happy, mad, sad, or afraid into how we talk about our bodies. Instead of saying, I feel uncomfortable, we'll say, I feel fat. I'm like, well, okay, so if fat isn't a feeling, fat is a energy-rich substance that's a noun, like I feel cup, or it's an adjective, I feel blue, with the color blue. It doesn't work right in the sentence when people say I feel fat. What are you really saying?
Myself for being fat according to a certain
standard. So they'll be like, it's like I would say, can we rewind this or reel this back in and say, if fat was, or if I feel fat was actually I feel uncomfortable, what just happened? What thought or feeling, emotion, sensation, flashback, experience, what just happened that you translated into the language of food and body? Because you can do change the body game like our culture says, and like, oh, I feel fat, so I'm going to go take pills and restrict and binge and purge and I'll over exercise, all the things. Or you can be radically curious, maybe some self-compassion here. Maybe let's think about like what just happened. Because yesterday you weren't saying you felt fat. You're just doing your day.
Sure.
Today you're like, and I guarantee you, a bagel you just ate for breakfast didn't make you feel like you can't fit into your car today. So what just happened? And I'm like, oh, my boss gave me another assignment on top of the other 10 assignments I'll never get done. And I'm just too overwhelmed to speak the truth about it, because people pleasing, whatever their issue is. Like, I don't know how to communicate my needs. It's easier to hate yourself, hate your body. If I just fix my body or obsess over here, I can pretend like that's not happening. That's it. And that's always what it's about. Same thing with eating too. You can say, I feel fat, or I gotta go. I used to do that. I've been all into the spectrum with eating disorders. So it's like, I can't wait to go to the drugstore and get pounds of candy and eat, because I don't know how to express the crap I'm going through right now. I don't have a language for it. So I'm eating.
It's so available, isn't it? It's so available. Like it's just
so
it's the price of a few dollars. It's right.
Yeah, I spent $3 on 5 pounds of candy and eat and go to sleep and then survive again tomorrow, until I learned that, like, wow, not only do I feel worse and worse and worse, my circumstances isn't any better either.
Comparison's another one, right? Like, I've never felt so fat, inverted commas, as when I lived with the circus in Ethiopia, surrounded by these ripped, beautiful, slightly malnourished, muscly boys. You know, like
Malnourished is the word
beautiful
there.
black guys from Ethiopia, you imagine it. And I was like, whoa, I'm like skinny and fat at the same time compared to these boys. You know, it's just comparison. It's like, it's even like down to like who's in the gym some days, you know? Like I can be in the gym and be like, yeah.
So comparison's about envy.
Uh-huh.
Envy is about I've learned some standards that I'm comparing myself to that tell me I'm not enough. You gotta uproot the I'm not enoughness. And it's like, is that really true? And who says? And like, oh, I learned that so and so from a person who also didn't feel like enough. And so you see the chain of like, this is all just projecting our trauma on each other.
Influencer on Instagram.
And like, I always have clients like, wait a minute. So you're taking you're comparing yourself and getting advice from people who also have unprocessed trauma and are using food as a way to cope with the feelings they can't deal with as your standard to live by. I'm like, you're in trouble. We can't live this way if we're going to actually be embodied humans. So
not so smart. Like shame comes with the body for so many people, but also pride, right? Like people don't talk about that one so much, you know, like, you know, I kind of started to grow these bad boys, you know, like in the gym the last 6 months. And it's like, you know, part of me is like, yeah, look at my arms, check me out, you know? But I mean, that's just a different side of the same thing, like my well-being being dependent upon the size of my triceps or whatever.
Same deal. And I think if people will ask me like, well, is it okay to like work out or if my body changes? I'm like, look, it's all about the motive. Sure, great, you get bigger biceps, that's fun and cool. But if you feel like you're a piece of crap when you like don't train as hard and you have other agendas in your life, you're in trouble. Versus like, that's fun and cool, but you also still like yourself just as much with smaller biceps and you're doing your life, you're good then. It doesn't matter. Up or down.
Some pretty insecure big guys in the gym because to put that much effort in, you have to have a serious motivation. You know what I mean? Like, isn't he so big you're going to get with what I do, which is like 4 hours a week, you know, like people are doing 4 hours a day. Like what's driving that? Unless they're a professional bodybuilder, I don't, you know, there's something going on there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I work with that too. They don't tend to come to you as much because it's pretty vulnerable and, you know, but it happens occasionally and big act of courage to be like, you know, I think this is getting out of hand and I don't even know why I'm doing this anymore, but I can't stop on either end of the spectrum.
Right. I can see where you get addicted to it. I can see where people get into that and be like, hey, I'll be happier if I just had more of this. And just with the guys, they're taking a lot of drugs, you know, like a lot of Australians, a lot of people in anything in the fitness industry that's putting a lot of dangerous shit in their bodies just to get that perfect look, you know? Okay, we need to be wrapping up fairly soon. Tracy, is there anything we haven't talked about that you feel like you want to hit upon or you want to touch on?
You know, I don't think so. I mean, we touched on a whole bunch of really intimate stuff, vulnerable stuff, really interesting stuff. So I would just encourage you to learn a lot more before deciding like, oh, this is not for me. This is a bunch of hoo-ha. It's like, you know, our bodies were wired. We were all born normal intuitive eaters. Put a baby in a high chair, you put food on their tray, they eat it. When they're done, they're done. So they weren't, there's no education there. There's just
right. The opposite,
like,
in fact. It's hard to get them to do meal times, right? Even to quite an old age, kids are like, I'm not hungry. Like, it's dinner. Like, I don't care. I'm not hungry.
So if you don't believe in a lot of stuff I've already talked about, go watch kids eat. That's a really a wonderful experience. It's a really so fun to watch kids eat and how they eat in bits and bites and dribs and drabs, and they grow just fine. Usually, unless we tamper with it, that's where kids get in trouble. So when we're trying to like push our adult stuff on them, is where the root of the stuff starts. So watch some kids eat and then read some books and listen to some podcasts and just see like,
Is there any sort of big names that people you recommend in this space? And then we'll finish obviously with your own resources.
Sure. I mean, the intuitive eating book is a good place to start. Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reich. Anti-diet, Krista Harrison. She's got a podcast and a book out there. I like some of the oldie stuff too. I've been doing this 20 something years. So it's like, you know, there's all the new stuff, but some of the old books are really good. Big Fat Lies by Glenn Geisler, if you're really into the science and the health of like fatness and fitness and all that, because it's like just important to be fit. The weight's not as relevant around that. It doesn't mean it doesn't ever matter, but people are way better off stop tampering with their weight and focus on health and movement and emotional health and safety and all that than they are trying to get to some magical number kind of thing. Those are good places to get your mind wrapped around what's going on. And then
who are the least like annoying? Because you're like the least annoying person I think I've met in this space. There's an English lady that we had on the show years ago who was pretty good from the Beyond Chocolate organization. But a lot of the people I find in this space, like, they're like, because you're worth it, you can eat what you want and be free. And just from a sort of European sensibility, I want to like, like who's not annoying in the space, because you're not annoying, and I really like that.
Well, I do a lot of videos. I just try to teach. I get to the root of things pretty quick. I don't mess around a lot with like, no, diets don't work. It's like, we all know that.
You're on YouTube. I'm going to find you on YouTube.
Okay, so I've got like,
what do I put in? Tracy Brown food, like what's gonna
Tracy Brown RD, and you'll get like ad nauseum videos of like all kinds of topics that nobody else wants to talk about, because
getting started with working through your food. I'm going to download that one. I've got the fancy YouTube where you can download stuff. I highly recommend that to the whole world. But I'm going to download Intuitive Eating in a Diet Obsessed World. It's not so much for guys, I find, on this topic.
So there's a guy named there's not a lot for guys, but Aaron Flores. He's a guy in California, and I think he had binging disorders, recovered. He's a dietitian that does this work.
Dietitian who dropped the diet. Aaron, Aaron Flores. Okay, we'll look him up.
And I can't speak to like how much people love it, hate it, whatever, but he's one of the few male voices. I know there's a doctor in the UK, and I don't know his name, Joshua something, that has
let's just point people to you. We've been overly generous now. So where do people find you? Like, I find you on Instagram. What's your Insta handle?
Sure, it's easy. Just my name, Tracy Brown RD, at Facebook, Instagram.
RD, like Romeo Delta.
Yep.
Right. What does that mean?
Registered dietitian.
Okay, I didn't know what that was. And your website?
Same thing. Tracy Brown RD.
Tracy Brown RD. Awesome. Well, Tracy, I found this personally helpful, and it's quite a personal topic, since I feel a bit vulnerable sharing about the stuff, and it's nice to have a conversation about it.
Went right in there.
Real shit, It's real stuff.
You went in there. I'm like, well, I can analyze and decode this all you want. I don't know how far you want to go. So
I just want to say, lastly, I wouldn't recommend eating a vegan, because they don't have enough meat on them. But you can floss with most vegans. And if you are going to eat someone like one of those nice paleo boys from the gym, if you are going to, if you are on the cannibal diet, that's the people I'm going to recommend. Okay, so Tracy, it's been a pleasure. Stay in touch. You're always welcome to message me, and I'll definitely be looking up some more of your stuff. So I really appreciate your time today.
Mark, likewise. Thank you so much for having me. Have a good one.
Pleasure.